I don't think politicians really saw this scandal coming in the way that it has. Perhaps it wasn't seen a week ago to have been this cut-through story that it became.
That's right. And actually, speaking to MPs, you get varying different opinions on how much this story is cutting through and indeed costing them on the doorstep. There are some Conservatives who say it is bad, but the sorts of voters that it's turning off are the sorts of voters that have basically left us anyway and see this as a reinforcement of all of their concerns about the sleaze and scandal that's engulfed the Conservative Party for years, ever since Partygate and some of the issues that arose beyond. Then there are others who say, actually, the real issue here was that Rishi Sunak took too long to suspend support for these candidates, that he showed a lack of political judgment in trying to sort of show strength, and that he had some kind of blind spot and was potentially too loyal to Craig Williams, who was, of course, his very close aide, advisor and friend. So I think ultimately this scandal isn't coming to hurt political parties too much, but it is certainly having cut through.
Yes, Aubrey, I mean, to be honest, we're getting a lot of messages in from our viewers and listeners saying it's only a big story, it's only a big scandal, because you journalists keep harping on about it and you keep asking politicians about this betting stuff instead of asking them about the bread and butter policies that we care about. There's probably a little bit of truth to that, no?
Quite possibly. I mean, we're basically in a quieter period in the election campaign where both main parties now, and indeed all of the other parties, have released their manifestos. They have been accused of refusing to engage in the substance of discussions, for example, about potential tax rises that might be necessary or spending cuts, or whether they might have to increase debt in the next parliament. So journalists are still absolutely focused on those questions as well. I think it's probably just a slight vacuum. The polls aren't moving. The manifestos have been released. This is a running story. The Prime Minister only took his decision yesterday. So that's why I think some people feel as though it's been dragged out by the politicians rather than the press.
Sometimes it feels like the collective press pack is like a metaphorical cat chasing various laser pointers. And we had the laser pointer that was Nigel Farage for a week or two. And then it was Ukraine, and now it's betting. And suddenly another laser pointer will come along, and almost the undivided attention of Britain's esteemed press lobby will just sort of switch to the new colour, to the fancy, shiny thing.
Quite possibly. I mean, journalists sometimes are a bit like magpies. You know, we sort of see the shiniest thing in front of us. But again, I do think that there is a real breadth to the coverage. There's lots of scrutiny, for example, of Labour's plans on the assumption that they are going to come into office in, what is it now, 8 days' time. So there is a great deal of scrutiny being paid to the policy as well as just the large P politics.
Now, The Times, Aubrey, does a lot of work on the issue of transgenderism and the potential conflicts maybe with women's rights. How much are you finding that that's playing with your readership? How concerned are people about this issue? I mean, Starmer's been asked so many times about this issue. He's given a bit of a vague answer in the past. What's the feeling about that as an issue?
I think Keir Starmer realises that this is a debate that has become more salient and that his original answers on this subject have provoked some concern, not least from a Labour MP, Rosie Duffield. In the last week, of course, J.K. Rowling, the famous author, wrote to The Times saying that she was really concerned about Keir Starmer's stance on this, and there's been a new battle picked between Kemi Badenoch and David Tennant. I think that goes to show the breadth of concern about the debate, but I suppose David Tennant hasn't helped himself by telling Kemi Badenoch to shut up and saying that he wished she wasn't around anymore. I think all politicians have basically said that this debate has become sometimes too confrontational, too toxic and heated, and so, you know, they're very happy to talk about it, but they would rather do so from a position of mutual respect, and it doesn't seem as though David Tennant was showing that to Kemi Badenoch.
No, it's interesting to hear the words from Keir Starmer in this election campaign. As you say, there does seem to have been an evolution, a shift in the rhetoric, but not just the rhetoric, on policy as well. The Labour Party in Scotland, of course, voted in favour of self-identification, and now Keir Starmer has sort of come up with this halfway house position whereby, in order to obtain a gender recognition certificate, transgender people will not have to go through the current panel of doctors and lawyers as exists now, but simply one specialist doctor, although not self-ID. Is he at the risk of sort of standing in the middle of the road on this issue?
Well, I mean, sometimes standing in the middle of the road is the right place to be. And it sort of depends on how you take a view about both sides. I think in this instance, he does understand that there are very strong feelings, not just within the Labour Party, but amongst voters as a whole. And he wants to get to a position where he can try and ensure that the rights of transgender people are extended and that they are supported, given that they face much higher percentage in terms of like the chance of being committed a hate crime against or potentially killing themselves as well. You know, there's a real kind of health and mental health aspect to this as well. And he doesn't want to pit those sort of rights, trying to increase support for them against women's rights. Now, how you find that middle ground, I think, will probably be one of the big talking points of the next 6 to 12 months. But he is trying to adapt this sort of strategy where he doesn't defend either side and ultimately tries to show compassion. Whether or not voters believe it, given that he has in the past been, I think he said that it wasn't right at all to say that every woman didn't have a penis. I think he said it was 99.99% of women who don't. And now he's been much more categorical and said after Tony Blair that he agreed with the former Prime Minister and women are people that have a cervix. But he's going to come potentially unstuck for his previous comments. It's about the policy.
It's going to be very difficult, actually, because, I mean, the government and various ministers have been working on guidance for schools for God knows how long. They've been talking about this issue and the interaction between women's rights and transgender rights for so long now, and it still seems to be that there's no sort of consensus on what the policy should be and where the issues are, really. Not your paper, but I'm sure you've seen an interview with Keir Starmer in the Daily Mail. He was asked whether he may lurch to the left, further to the left, if he is elected. This is an issue for Keir Starmer. There is some distrust, particularly over his support for Jeremy Corbyn. Has he suddenly changed into a centrist overnight? Is that something that we'll hear more from? Well, we haven't got many days left, but I'm sure the Conservatives will want to make more of that.
It certainly is. It's one of the Conservatives' almost two main points of attack in saying that quite clearly in black and white, 4 years ago when he ran for the Labour leadership, he made pledges like abolishing university tuition fees and renationalising water, mail and rail. He has adopted a very different stance and U-turned on a lot of those promises. Now, he argues that the economic situation, if you like, has changed. It was crashed by Liz Truss in October 2022, and so a lot of the things he wanted to do 4 years ago simply aren't doable anymore. But for somebody to change their politics seemingly so quickly, that is the opportunity the Conservatives spy to paint him as a flip-flopper, as somebody who's untrustworthy. And therefore, with a huge majority, he might return to those really rather left-wing instincts, they think. And that's being used as an argument to corral people to get out and vote for the Conservatives so that there is that strong opposition, as they say.
It's almost reminiscent of that 1997 New Labour, New Danger strategy, the red eyes that were painted across pictures of Tony Blair. Not sure how successful it turned out to be in 1997, but Aubrey Allegretti, thank you so much for talking through those big issues on the campaign trail.
I think you are sure.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure.
I think you are sure. Yes, thank you, Aubrey.